Hey, hello everyone. Good evening, good morning, wherever you're joining from, and welcome to this part 12 of AMA Ask Me Anything of our Clarity Chat. This is the 67th episode of Clarity Chat, and as always, let me begin by thanking you all for your encouragement and engagement from all over the world. The AMA sessions of Clarity Chat are free flowing just like a river. I love these direct interactions with you as you know as we keep in touch on a direct basis. It's always a great opportunity to do a clarity chat as an AMA session and as a solo chat. So this is a live face-to-face discussion, but we start by picking some unanswered backlog questions from the past chats. But as usual, our first priority goes to live questions. I can see those questions have started coming already. Thank you, Sats, for being there before us and sending those questions. Keep them coming. Um, well, um, we also have an innovative idea that we open this platform for any one of you to come live with me on the chat. If you have a case study around a technology success, or any IT insight or something you picked up from Clarity Chat and applied and it worked for you, send us a comment mentioning your discussion topic, and that you want to come on the chat, and my team will send you on a private message. They'll send you the virtual studio link. Um, but let's not philosophize. Let's talk real. Let's talk practical stuff. Let's talk experiences. And let's give a relief to the gyan for the weekend. So we'll cover some backlog of past questions. I call them as seed funding for the chat. Like, for example, how do you lead leaders? Making new hires perform in your new environment, and a future view of IT landscape. As always, you will get the honest answers, case studies, or an approach or a way to think about these. Clarity Chat is all experiences, no gyan. So before going ahead, I would request all my audiences to share your name and where you're joining from in the comment box on YouTube or LinkedIn. Meanwhile, let's see who all have joined here. I can see Satya here and some questions from him. So that's give us a little bit time and we'll pick up your question. And we have Virendra Devi Ram joining us. Thank you, Virendra, for joining us and for making your presence felt here. Really appreciate it. Okay, so as I said, do let us know if you want to share something, you want to discuss something with me, and you can come on, you can come live with me on the chat. So let me first pick up a live question, okay, from Satya. He says, leadership has become such a buzzword that official roles have changed from manager to leader for mid-level roles. I'm already laughing. From from your experiences, what has yet to change in 2023, and what good things have you observed? Um, okay, so let me pick that question with what has happened recently. You know, Satya, you have picked up rightly that the world that was in, let's say, pre-pandemic and 2023, I'm meaning as a post-pandemic world, what had changed. And I think the change really brings out, separates the leaders from managers. Because the old style of manager, whether you call yourself a manager or leader, the old style of managing people, when everybody's around you and you can have any meeting anytime, and you have a lot of control on, on that 9 to 5 that people are in the office. I think that has completely gone. The hybrid work is for real. The managerial style has to go from command and control to influencing and leading, real leading. And I'll come to that, the difference from manager to leader. So the biggest thing that changes is, is this new reality of people coming back to office. They have experienced a certain amount of freedom, a certain amount of autonomy, and a certain amount of flexibility in their lives, and they will expect, an employer to maintain that. And you have heard of the Great Resignation. It's because it's a rebellion against, the set routine of a 9 to 5 versus, what people were experiencing in work from home. So I think the true leadership for 2023 is where you are able to manage the expectation, freedom, flexibility of your people, um, uh, even when they come to office. Okay, and you're able to lead and influence them rather than command them. So, Satya, coming to your first question about the buzzwords that official roles have changed from manager to leader, I think that's simply a buzz. You really have to evaluate it based on how much uh, people are really investing in leadership. So there was a post that I'm working on, which is like the difference between talking about leaders versus talking about leadership. I think I already posted that. So it is so leadership is a process. It is like the process creates leaders in an organization, and not just by putting a tag of like a performance manager to a performance leader or a HR manager to HR leader. I think that's just optics. I think you have to go beyond and see what are the leadership development processes, what kind of mentoring schemes are there, what kind of leadership development investments the company is making, what kind of leaders identification mechanisms they have. And when you see great organizations, they differentiate themselves by having very, very clear and structured leadership development programs, mentoring programs, and all that. So I hope that partly answers your question. I don't think this question can be answered fully, but yeah, if you have a follow-up question, do send it back. Okay. So meanwhile, let me again bring in some people beyond what I brought in initially. So Mayank Bedi joining us from Bangalore. Hi Mayank. If you have some thoughts about this leadership versus managers, do send them. We have Sajith Kumar Swaminathan. He's saying, be like a river open to flow. Okay. From a technology implementation perspective, ATS, sometimes the flow is so strong that you have a lot of resistance. How do you understand or control the flow? Mm, mm, mm. Sajith, I don't know whether I understand this question very well. So if you can just send me a bit of a clarification, it will be good. I'm trying to understand, the lot of resistance. Is it from the people, the users, or is it from the organization per se? that that they don't, that the way the how fast the technology is changing, you have a lot of resistance to just be there and not flow with it. So let me know what that really means. Okay, so um, we have Pramod Shetty here. So Pramod, hi Pramod. Uh, Good evening. Assume we have one product or service. How to go ahead with an innovation idea and convince the management? I think you wanted to say hi Jagdish, but you ended up saying hi Satya. Well, I think Satya is there, so Satya, that hi is for you. Uh, so assume we have one product or service. How do we go ahead with an innovation idea and convince the management? So I think in today's world, the best way to sell an idea internally to is to just do a POC, right? Or an experiment. And sometimes you can actually do it from your own, what do you call, you can carve out a little bit of a budget, or you can convince your management to do a small investment into a POC. Um, what we call as an MVP in the startup world. That MVP in a corporate context becomes a POC, a proof of concept. Do that and bring out some success. It may not be a full success, it may be initial success. And then you showcase that success to bring out, to get more investments for it. The other way to do it is that if, let's say, the idea is so big that there's no way to do a POC, and I've done those kind of programs, then I think what you need to do is to create a robust and rugged plan, whether it's crunching the numbers, bringing out the worldview, taking some examples from other industries, etc., etc. But do your homework well, very well, um, to convince the management. You see, end of the day, let's understand that the management will put their money where there are returns. Okay? And I think what we talk in Clarity Chat is all about getting the business value out of your technology. So you're not going to get funding for something which simply gives somebody some kind of an aha, unless you can show a path from that aha to either revenues or cost reductions or better experience, etc., etc. Right. So my advice will be either do an MVP kind of a POC, show the early results, get the funding, or create a very very convincing plan with solid numbers and a solid outside in view, what I call as a benchmark view, which gives the management hijibijis that hey, what if we don't do it, we are going to miss the bus. Either of the two can work depending on what is feasible. So we have Sunil Punjabi. Hi Sunil, thanks for joining Clarity Chat. We have Sajit Sajit is giving a clarification mostly from the users in adopting technology. So, Sajit, so I understand. So, see, this is a classic case of change management. That uh, and let's understand how the equation works. Okay. See, most everyone in the organization has a certain role, right? And that role, if you go down further into that role is actually about managing a certain process. Everyone is the owner of a certain process, or a certain part of a process, right? Now, when you bring in technology, what happens is it changes the processes fundamentally. It will automate some part of the process. It will make some part of the process redundant. It will make some part of the process transparent. Everyone can see it. And all of these three things, they are what defines a role in the company. And that definition people take personally, that I handle this. So every, like for example, if I take in the an old world example, secretaries, uh, reason of existence is that every single communication that goes out of the manager's office, is worked on by me, um, you know, uh, spell checked, grammar checked by me, typed by me, and then it is sent out, right? Now, the moment you have word processing and email and all of that, this entire thing changes. This entire process itself goes away. Okay, um, so therefore, the insecurities that people get whenever you implement a technology are coming from the changes that are happening to the processes, and therefore, their sense of existence or importance going up and down because of that, and mostly because the processes are becoming more transparent, the KPIs are becoming visible. It threatens people in different ways. If that's the starting point, then your change management efforts have to start from either something really big, where people come out of their respective places and they say that, yes, this is where the organization should be, this is where we should be, and yeah, I will do what it takes for me. That's one part of it. The second part of it is that we have to, the way I said that, we have different roles in the organization. You have to look at every technology implementation. You have to think through from a role by role by role point of view, okay? And then try to map as to what changes in that which will make someone, which will threaten somebody's power equation. So, just to give you example, and this example I give many times, okay. Um, and again, sorry, I know I have got some feedback, from the ClariTeaChat survey that, I do talk about a lot about CRM, but, maybe one day you will understand what kind of a massive, massive transformation it was. And that has been like my entire learning from into managing IT. Most of it has come from CRM. So we had this classic case that, the CRM was supposed to replace the local dealer management systems at the dealerships. Now, who will be the biggest impacted person from this kind of implementation? It will be that IT manager at the dealership, or the system administrator, as we call it, at the dealership. Today, he or she is the one who's basically controlling every single process, how it is defined, how it is put into the application. Um, the all the senior management of the dealership depends on that IT manager to give them all kinds of MIS, and now you are going to bring out a self-service analytics. So we said that, okay, the biggest make or break factor is going to be that dealer system admin, or the dealer IT manager. And then we tried to get into his shoes and see things from his perspective, and we saw that the threat was real. Now we have to find something which will address that threat, right? Which will address that concern. So create, we decided to make that role of system administration in the dealership as an aspirational role, and as, like, a sort of blue-eyed character uh, within the CRM scheme of things as well. So did many things, a special 1 week training program for them. Everyone else was going through a 2 3 day training program. We put them through a 1 week training program. Everyone else was going through training program in their respective locations. We got these guys into, some nice place, uh, one in each state, and trained them. We had a separate, sort of support channel for them. And the biggest of all was that we gave them that aspiration that you come and work and learn a new technology. Forget your Fox Pro and D-Base. Come and work in a new technology, and your career is going to be different. So I have, Sunil here, who's an uh, you know, automotive subject matter expert, now working globally. He came from that channel. he took that, he bought our line of thought, and he built a career into automotive coming from a dealership system. So here is Sunil Punjabi. Thanks, Sunil, for joining me on the Clarity Chat, and maybe one day we'll talk about your story. So I hope that answers your question. That you have to map people, you have to address their concerns, and you have to do it with a certain amount of genuinity and sincerity, which will make people trust you, and then they will come out of their comfort zones and support the enterprise agenda. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So, Sajid, if you have any follow-up question on that, please do feel free to send it across. Okay. Now let me go to the next question, and maybe bring in some people here. Okay. So we have Mayank here. Mayank says, Jagdish Bhai and Satyaji, in my view, we need to ensure that any innovation should bring the effectiveness or improvements in organization pain area. So we should quantify the value addition in terms of manpower and cost savings by bringing that innovation against existing process. Then justify your proposition by having a sample POC to convince and get approval from management. Absolutely, absolutely. So when we call about value addition from technology, that value addition from technology is nothing but you know either improving people productivity or improving the productivity of money, which is like saving cost or having an impact on revenue itself, right? Or completely transforming an experience of a stakeholder, whether it's employee experience or a customer experience, or a channel partner experience or a supplier experience, which again eventually goes into the productivity equation itself. If you improve the experience, people have no struggle using technology, and therefore their productivity goes up. Thank you for that thought, Mayank bhai. This is really appreciate that. Okay, so now we have D Venkat Ramana. Hey, hi, Venkat. Thanks for joining us. Okay, Sajid, so looks like that connected with what you were thinking. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Mayank, yeah, we understood your view is against Mr. Pramod query about management to fund an idea, right? And we have Amarinder here. Amarinder, hi. Uh, from Bengaluru. I hope the flood situation is under control and things are getting back on track. Okay, so let me pick up some more questions here. So we have Satya asking, who's more successful, a leader who has crystal clear clarity of vision or a general direction made clearer after consulting with his team? So, sets today's world is a VUCA world, right? This uncertainty, confusion, ambiguity, and what is that? Fear and all of that. So, in today's world, to have absolutely clear vision of what you're going to be doing, 1 year later, 2 year later, 3 year later is very difficult. It has to be. I think in today's world, a leader who will be successful is someone who's not tied down to a certain whatever, either a vision or a mindset or a way of doing things or an organization structure. I think what we require today, the biggest thing in leaders is flexibility and adaptability. The world is changing so fast. The technology landscape is changing so fast. With the pandemic and all, people's what do you call idea of what a workplace should be and how an organization should be engaging with them, or the startups are showing the way how organizations need to engage with their customers. I think and there is no final word on it yet as to this is the way you need to do it. Okay? It's evolving very fast. So one we need is somebody who's not really like spending 3 months in planning, where all the planning assumptions that you took 3 months back, kind of get challenged. But someone like, who's very agile and flexible and action oriented. So you've got to keep experimenting. Whatever works for you, adopt it. Whatever doesn't work for you, throw it away. The direction should be very clear. I would rather go with your second part of your question. The general direction should be clearer. I think one very important thing is that your principle should be very clear, right? I mean, like for example, whatever is the VUCA world we are in today, one thing that doesn't change in your business success is your customer centricity. That's one of the most fundamental principles, right? Another thing that doesn't change in this fast changing world is a motivated employee, right? And everything you do as an organization to motivate your employee. Something else which doesn't change in this VUCA world is, your aspiration as to the purpose that you're trying to fulfill as an organization, right? Uh, what is the fundamental problem in the world that you're trying to solve? So, and how well your employees buy into that vision? How do your customers buy into your vision? What you're trying to do? And if that is clear to everyone, then I mean, regardless of the changes in the entire world, I think you will be able to push your way through with clear focus, but evolving, all the time. I mean, I'll give you an example sets. So I'm running, I co-founded a startup, and one of the things that we established early on as a principle when we were looking at what kind of tech stack we should be using, we realized that, you can't really commit to a particular tech stack. So what we need to commit to is what we heard one of our partners say to us, and we really caught on that word, was commit to an evolutionary architecture. That means my architecture will has to be flexible. My architecture has to evolve as as we progress, and that means that at any point in time, I need to architect in a way that I keep my future options open. I don't get locked down to something. So midway, we sort of did an experiment to, like, take some of our stuff to another cloud from what we were using. Uh, it was a bit, kind of disruptive to the team that, oh, I mean, why are we unnecessarily changing something that is working? But when we explained to them, what the thinking behind is, they loved it and they said, oh, yeah, yeah, let's do it. So be clear about what purpose you have, and be clear about what are the fundamental unchanging principles that need to be established and that need to be enforced, continuously reinforced. And I think rest of the things you'll be able to take care. Let me know if that makes sense, and please do send me your comment. Okay. Okay, let me go to other questions around. um, yeah. I'm like hesitating to bring in, Satya's questions, because I looks like he's asking all the questions. So guys, everyone, please give some competition to Satya. He's the one who's writing all of them as sets. Okay, so let me bring in another question. I don't want to have a reverse bias against you, Sat. So let me bring in another question from you. You're the one asking questions, so let me answer your question. Transition to public cloud is an effective offload of the ops function to the public cloud vendor. Could you share the pros cons in your view? Um, Not necessarily, Satya. I mean, see, when I look at technology function per se, or what we are doing in technology, I always look at, like, how it happened in in other functions, whether it is finance or whether it is HR, and so any mature function, the way it evolved will tell you the story of how it will evolve in case of technology, because there is nothing called a blind outsourcing, right? Whether it's cloud or whether it's any other function, whether it's finance or HR or customer service. Nobody, simply put something out there without really the controls and certain performance measures and certain, I would say, optionality. So, uh, and think of it like I think IT is the last one out there, to basically leverage, what I call as a power plant equation. Um, so the mental model for cloud for me is, the difference between people using generators in their homes versus people using the power drawn from a power plant, right? So think of it, um, long back when, when electricity was just invented, people set up first individually. The rich people set up, their individual power plants, and those gensets and all of that. There was a noise problem thereby, and then after quite a while, people conceptualize that, hey, you know what, we should set up some such a noisy thing somewhere outside of the city, and then we should lay those wires into the city. And I think that's something which is happening exactly in a similar way. Small businesses couldn't afford the level of technology that large businesses afforded. So large businesses could set up their own power plants, which is their own data center, their own applications, invest in private development of applications. um, um, and we know that the technology always came to large organizations at a fraction of the cost what is the published price list. And it was like a very, very unequal world earlier. um, Large organizations could get as high as 60, 70, 80% discount on the list price, whereas somebody buying 10 licenses would hardly get like maybe 20, 30% discount. So it's like, the bigger guys become more efficient and the smaller guys cannot become efficient because of. So that's a equation that has changed with cloud. And today, as a five-member organization that I run, I get my collaboration technology probably at the same price or at a marginally higher price than, let's say, if someone who's having 20,000 employees, right? I mean, I use my accounting probably in a much, much, I would say, more, uh, at least visually more sophisticated way, and no less controls or no less compliance than a large organization, just because of the cloud. I mean, I use Joho Books, and has everything. In fact, has more than what I have seen large organizations do. I can actually send, I can automatically get an invoice email to my customer on the first of every month with a payment link, linking to them to my payment gateway, and get the money. Many people still don't do it, right? So I would not look at it as an effective offload of the ops functions. I would say it's actually a natural evolution. You see, audit has been outsourced. You see, customer service has been outsourced to call centers. You see, even finance function to an extent outsourced in terms of account payables, account receivables, and all of that. You can see, like, a certain amount of even the materials functions being outsourced in terms of having the logistics coordination centers, etc., etc. And the entire thing has been built on technology platforms. And now what we are saying is that the technology operations is undergoing the same change that technology enabled for rest of the functions. Okay, so that's in my view. That's in my view how to look at the cloud with respect to other functions. Now, coming to your question about pros and cons of it, I think the pros and cons are the same that that are in other. We are all um, uh, whatever can go wrong in, let's say, any other function. You can get tied down to the vendor. You may have your entire, let's say, knowledge base with somebody else, and you may struggle if you want to change something. Um, I think those are the same things. So, what you have to do is, to do a very rigorous, I would say, risk. So, let me rephrase it. Okay. So, what you really require is risk management mindset here. Um, as you, whatever you outsource, there is a certain control that you lose, and the risks that arise, they arise because of the control, because of the control that you're losing on that particular operation, right? Like, for example, if you have, like, if you have a data center, you control the hardware, you control the network, you control the power supply and everything. And let's say you simply go to a public cloud and you lose control on all of that. Some of it you will really find an answer that why did I need to do that? I mean, like, for example, why did I need to, you know, sort of look at my, hardware or my power supply and all that? I mean, that's commodity. Somebody else can do it for me. But some of it, like, is where you would want to retain some control, and that's where you need to bring in that, okay, so this is the risk, and this is how I want to mitigate the risk, either through contracting or by creating certain optionality, or by having more rigorous documentation around what you've done, what you're doing, etc., etc. But I think the answers will be always individual to your organization, and the answers will lie in what can go wrong if I do this, and what is my mitigating action that I need to take. I hope that answers your question. Um, Sets, let me see if there are any other questions. I haven't, by the way, gone to the questions which are there in my backlog. Okay, so what in your view will be the next phase of unicorns from India? Hmm, that's an interesting one. So what we have to see, Satya, is you know uh, what is it that's happening in India, which is where we are the leaders, where which is not happening in other parts of the world. So I can see quite a few. I think, like, for example, in agriculture, I think the amount of um, opportunity that we have in India to make a difference with agriculture, that's something which is replicable across the world. So that's probably one area that I can think of. The other is, of course, fintech. The amount of government push which is there, in terms of digitization, whether it's UPI, whether it is, um, uh, whether it is, the ONDC, or something else, like, where, like, your financial data can be shared digitally, etc., etc. So there's a lot of government push. There's a big wave, which is there coming from the government, and I think, and the good thing is that these are, like, all open. I mean, they're not the domain of only the large players. So we have seen unicorns come in that area. I think they will further there'll be further spawning of unicorns in the areas where there's a huge difference to be made with the government pushing the agenda. Okay, so I'll limit it to that. I would really love to say that one day my startup Flock and Go also will be a unicorn, but I'll hold back that comment for now. Okay, so we have. Oh, Amrinder, I was missing a question from you. Thanks for asking this question. Question to Jagdish: what are the ideal dynamics, chemistry, influence, purchase power, decision making between a business function owner and a CIO when evaluating and implementing a new project, technology, getting a new vendor on board? Who owns what part of decision making? When is the best time to involve the CFO? Mm, I think, Amrinder, it's a great question, and I think there has to be a certain um, method, or certain, I would say, formality around who will do what. Okay, um, typically, like it happens nowadays, like it has been happening, there will be always a team of technology and the business function jointly, which will undertake technology evaluation and addition. But we have to be very clear about that, it's the requirements and the, I mean, whatever the business impact of it, etc., etc. There are some parts of it, even like the best practices, even let's say the industry adoption, etc., etc. Those parts have to be left to the business function, whereas we have to let the technology aspects of it be defined by IT, and of course the evaluation being done jointly. So let me tell you an anecdote instead of making it a a theoretical question. So here I was, with a BU head, and I and one of my function owners, we were having a joint review of that function, a fairly large function, fairly IT dependent function. So the business head was reviewing us jointly, and I had a sort of deal with the I while we were waiting for the BU head, I had a simple deal with my function owner. I said, hey, uh, let's be clear, okay? So we don't agree on everything, okay? Everything, but let us not bring up the contentious issues here. Um, and if you bring in something, then uh, don't blame me afterwards, okay? Well, the meeting happened. We showed how we are progressing. What are the major things that have been done, etc., etc. And the meeting like went very well. And towards the end, I think the guy turned euphoric, and he basically told that, "Sir, I want Jagdish to implement this particular technology for this particular purpose, and he is not agreeing." Okay, and I, I, so I, I looked at him, and then I told the viewer, I said, "Sir, let us be clear. Okay, who does what?" My view is that he defines the requirements, he defines the outcomes, he defines, a lot of other things which are related to business. But I think you have to trust me to choose the technology, and to look at the architecture, and to take the right decision from the organization from a long-term point of view. And I talked about that Hotel California story, that once you get into a technology you can't get out, so you better make your choices with a lot of rigor. And he thought for a few minutes, and then he said, "You listen, I think what Jagdish is saying makes sense. Uh, he can't mess up with the company's architecture by taking your recommendation or somebody else's recommendation. And if what if every one of my leaders start recommending their choicest of technology to Jagdish? I mean, where does he go? So you have to let it let it be with him, the technology selection part." And I think that actually sort of set the tone, because that sort of became a sort of precedence and principle for everyone. But I think the best thing uh, is to jot down all the areas of decision, but eventually, I think the choice of technology purely from an architecture, from a strategic vendor point of view, from a what do you call architecture point of view, has to rest with IT. I have been like very clear on that, and thankfully my business leaders have understood that. Okay, so we are sort of towards the end of our questions, but if you have any more questions, please feel free to ask. Meanwhile, there were a couple of good questions that were in my backlog, and one of them, which I definitely want to pick up here, is from Senthil, who asked. He is the chief engineer, chassis and vehicle dynamics at Volvo Group Trucking, and his question was, what is the most important transition to make from leading people to leading leaders? Okay, so when I bring it up, yes. Um, I had this transition from being an individual contributor to leading, individual contributors, then from leading individual contributors to leading managers, and then the biggest one of them, from leading managers to leading leaders. And I think my biggest learning, personal learning, was let go. I had subordinates who would come and tell me that, Jagdish, we know you can manage anything, but don't interfere in my work. And I'm like, okay, when did I do that? You started doing a process solution, for this particular one in front of everyone. I mean, why? Just say that so and so will do it. And I'm there to do it. So why are you doing my job? So I heard it enough from my, my next line of leaders that, don't micromanage, don't solve it for us. We will do it. Okay. So, and then finally, my learning was let go. Okay. So let's understand. I want to delve a little deep on this. So let's understand. When you lead leaders rather than leading managers. So what does a leader bring to the table? So a leader brings creativity to the table. They are like great literal thinkers. They are resourceful. They can you can leave it to them that forget about okay, don't worry about the resources. I'll manage it. Okay, I'll find the partners, or I'll find people from the team. I'll find people to collaborate with, etc., etc. They're very well networked, right? So you just need to trust their network. In fact, as a leader, your network is like as good as your next line's network, and they're very forward thinking. Okay, so as long as you have leaders like that, you just need to let go. Now, few things that I did, I have to sell them the vision. They need to buy into the vision. Okay, so you need to have a very aspirational vision. You need to sell it to them, and they need to believe in it. Most importantly, because once they believe in it, then you can just let go. Then they will run with your vision. But then you must also not just sell a vision, but set some impossible challenges also for them. I am deliberately saying impossible challenges because I have been setting impossible challenges for my leaders, and you know what? That really gets them a kick. It gives them a kick that, boss, I mean, I can achieve the impossible, right? But you also have to empower them, and I think the biggest way to empower them is to recognize them and to tell people that before you come to me, you need to go to them. Okay, so they are the decision makers, they are the leaders, they will take those decisions, and you don't need to bypass them. I'm just a figurehead. Okay, those guys are doing the real job, so you need to go to them. Yes, of course, if your job doesn't get done, definitely come to me. But also, in front of your superiors. So when I was like, with my peers or my superiors, I would still put my leader in front, and I would, let's say, um, I would ask my leader to make a presentation. I would ask my leader to get in front of people, because one very big, responsibility of leaders is to create more leaders, and is to enrich the leadership within the company, right? And that's, I call it, as part of the leadership process. If you have a leadership process, you are, you know, building more and more leaders. Otherwise, you are the only leader and everyone else, and there is a vacuum after that. So, as part of that responsibility that I took on myself, I was putting them in front. I was asking them to, like, lead those meetings. I would be there, but why don't you present? Okay, why don't you handle this? I mean, the pinnacle of it, I was on a foreign travel, and there was a emergency meeting of the audit committee of the board, and I had my CISO, and I told him to go and present to the board, and he was like all panicky. I've never done this, and all. I said, "Don't worry, this is what you need to do. Okay, build something, and I know you will manage it." And I think then next 3 months he ended up in front of the board 2 3 times, and did a fairly good job and became very comfortable in getting in front of the board, right? So you have to empower them, you have to develop them, and the only way to develop them is to, like, get them in front of the people that you would most of the time get in front of them. You also have to give them autonomy, but you have to set the boundaries. So the boundaries have to be in terms of the principles. The boundaries have to be in terms of what I was earlier saying, that whether it is customer centricity, whether it is uh, whether it is like employee experience, whether it is you know let's say financial prudence. So you need to set certain boundaries, and within those boundaries you have to give them the autonomy, right? And I think the biggest one of them is treat them as equals and try to create your replacement options out of your next set of leaders. And to that end, not everyone will be ready, so you need to expose them to different aspects of organization work, send them for trainings and see, how can you create more viable options. So my definition of leadership always has been to create more leaders, and then even when they are not ready, throw them in the water and then help them swim, help them learn swimming by mentoring them into how would I have handled it, right? So I hope that makes sense. Let me see if there are more questions here. Okay, so we have the questions coming in. So we have Sara Hanks. Hey, Sara. Long time no see. But even though you're late to, I know it's early morning for you. Um, and I'm so happy to see you here in the chat. Thank you for joining us. Uh, Now, let me take another question. Hey, Sara, if you have any question, please do ask. Okay. So we have D. Venkatramana asking, what about the controversial subject of moonlighting? Please do not think it is binding to answer. The question can be withdrawn. Absolutely not, Venkat. I mean, I'm outraged when I see, people, sort of saying that it is a sin or, it is this thing. I mean, for me, it's very clear, an employee and employer, there's no, um nobody is superior, nobody is inferior. I mean, it has to be a relationship of equality. Okay. And in that relationship of equality, I really love the idea of the Western world where, it's a very clear 40-hour a week contract. Now, I have 168 hours in the week, and of that, what I get paid for is 40 hours a week from my organization. I still have 128 hours to for myself. Nobody controls it. I'm sorry. Now, there has to be, as I said, there have to be some guardrails. There have to be some boundaries, and those boundaries have to be set very clearly. So you set the boundaries very clearly as to what you can do, what you cannot do, and nothing that you cannot do. What you cannot do is like something that you need to publish, or you need to be transparent with the organization. Like, for example, if you have a conflict of interest, if you're working for a competitor, you can't work for a competitor. You cannot take a decision maker role in a company which your company does business with. You can't run a company which provides resources on contract to your own company. So there are certain guardrails, but you think through what are the guardrails. But you cannot be commanding 128 hours of an employee's week's life when you pay him only for 40. And somebody wants to do what they want to do in the rest of it. I mean, that's not your problem. By the way, there are other factors to it. I am actually working on an article about this moonlighting, and also understanding what are the root causes of it. So one of the root causes of moonlighting is also the low levels, very very low levels of productivity in the IT industry, primarily happening because of the cost arbitrage. Now, that problem of low productivity sort of uh, found an outlet when there was a huge dearth of resources, and people had a lot of time. You are not giving them 8 hours of work, let's face it. And then you have other people who are crying for resources, other people who are by hook or crook, they want their technology problems to be solved. They want codes to be written. So they are looking out in the market, and it's like simply a need meeting a supply. And who created that supply? Who created that low productivity? It is, I mean, the industry itself created low productivity. So I mean, I am very, I mean, I have always been politically wrong, in many of these areas. But again, the principle is, let's be very clear. What are you paying the employee for? 40 hours, please. Don't go beyond that. I hope that answers your question, right? Okay. So, Partha, leadership equal to ownership. Do you agree, JCB? Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Wherever I have worked for, whatever role, whatever department I've worked for, I've always looked at things from my manager's point of view. I've always looked at the good of the company, and for the good of the company, or taking that ownership mindset. If it means challenging a policy, if it means taking pangas, or taking picking up certain fights, I have done it. Like, I'll give you an example. Another dear example to me. Um, Again, when I was working in the field as an excavator service engineer, um, you know, so I was the manager for about 10 or 11 people. And, once in a sort of matter of factly conversation, these guys told me that, sir, in that particular city, that was like a big city, expensive city, and, their allowance, there used to be fixed allowances at that time, and their allowance did not afford them, an air conditioned room. And, in Andhra Pradesh, the temperatures regularly go above 40. So they said that, we always stay in that particular hotel. So, but why? And they said that, listen, they have a centralized air conditioning, but they sell non-AC rooms because they have to fill up those rooms. And so what we do is, like, we open our doors and we let the corridor cool air come inside. And that really, I mean, I was really outraged that, this is what our employees have to do. For an employee of, like, for employees of an organization of this size and this reputation, and that kind of a brand, they have to resort to something like this just because of the company policy. And they are, like, spending 20 days away from home every month. And, we are not even giving them the basic necessity of a cool AC room at night when they are spending like the entire day, in the hot sun. So I said I'm going to pick up this fight. So I fought that battle. I even pitched it in front of our business unit head, and I said, "Sir, this is not done. This is not done for the reputation and brand that our company, enjoys. If anyone comes to know that, this is what our service engineers are doing, and we are not even paying them sufficient allowance to get them an AC room, it's like a slap on our face." And I said it in front of 20, managers, and it outraged. Actually, everyone went silent. But then, I think about 2 weeks later, we had a new policy which said that for these particular months, we are going to have a higher rates, so that people can afford, AC rooms. And of course, like, immediately after that meeting, we were asked to tell us, like, what are the minimum AC room rates in, different cities. And based on that, like, within 2 weeks, that policy came. So, I mean, this is something like, this is like ownership. Like, can people of my company, it's not about this company, it's about my company, be doing this? Right? So, sorry for that long answer, Partha, for the short question. But let's see what else we have. Let's move on. Okay. Um, yeah, Venkat says, create atmosphere for grooming leaders. Absolutely. Um, Venkat says, so long an employee does not use the time and material resources of the company to achieve the objectives of another company, it is fair of the employee earns an extra buck to put the food on the table and make a living. Harsh life a pleasant. Absolutely, Venkat. As I said, you put the controls, you put the guardrails, put the policies, but please don't make an overarching statement that it is a sin, or it is a treachery, or it is unethical and all that. I'm sorry, nobody gave you the right. You're not God, and nobody gave you the right to make those judgments about employees who are trying to make their ends meet, or who are just trying to get ahead in life. You get millions of dollars of salaries, not everyone else does. Yeah. Okay, so Sarah's question is, what advice do you have for people finding themselves where the manager's interest and the good of the company don't always align? Great question, Sarah. I bailed out, So yeah, it is like, either you find um, a way to, like, make other people see that, um, and like call out the bluff, but many times that's not possible, so you find another manager. The good thing is that the good managers' reputations are like perfumes. You can't hide them; they just spread fast. So in today's world, I would say employees have choices. They can choose their managers, and just reach out to the best guy who you think is going to be interested in your development, is going to be interested in your, I would say, um, where you have that alignment of values and what needs to be done. Because I don't think we should be breaking our heads around trying to change someone. Of course, I'm sure this question comes from where you've done that part, you've tried to do that. But yeah, as an employee, you do not have that kind of leverage. When you're a manager and you see that an employee is working not in the interest of the company, there is a certain coaching that you can do, but your options get limited when it's a manager. So you better find another manager, whether within the same company or another company. I don't know if that answers to your satisfaction, Sarah, but that's how I think. I kind of took my call so once, when we were working together, and I simply bailed out. Yeah. Okay. Unrelated such. Hey, we are like over the hour, and I was thinking like today we'll be done in 45 minutes, but let me still take the last couple of questions. Unrelated, that sets for you. But I feel the recent trend of quiet quitting is a lack of mentorship and clarity of career path for an employee. Without a North Star to strive for and also no growth prospects, people would not to give more towards the job. Sets. Yeah, that's this quiet quitting is simply like a breakdown of communication. See, there are always two levels of conversations going on in an organization, and so one is like at a formal level, your meetings, your deliverables, your target setting, your weekly reviews, your daily sync-ups. There's a formal, level of conversation. There has to be an informal level of communication which provides a human connect. Okay, and there are, and good leaders and good organizations always have a way, have processes and rituals and all to ensure that this other line of communication where people connect at a human level, and where the real truths come out, where the real stories come out, where the real motivations, the real challenges, the real pains of people, the real limitations of people come out, those conversations also take place. Now, what happened was in the pandemic, the second line of conversations, which is typically the water cooler conversations or like, those one on one corridor conversations, they completely stopped, and people lost that second, level of the more human level of communication. But the people who, I think the good leaders sort of went that extra mile to create that line consciously. Okay, because it doesn't come easy. It doesn't come natural. When you're in an office, it comes very naturally, but not when you're in a virtual world. So I think what people have faced is this lacking that human track of communication and connection, and that has led to this quiet quitting. Quiet quitting. When you say lack of mentorship, that lack of mentorship happened, by chance, where the guys who would still be doing it, they didn't have that level of, I can say, self-awareness or the environment awareness or the employee awareness to understand that you do require that second, human track of communication. And I think that led to it. I mean, even today I run two different organizations, all virtually. Um, there is a huge effort that it takes to understand what is going on in people's minds, what are the challenges they are facing on a day-to-day basis, and to kind of replace those water cooler conversations with a different mode of you can call them as maybe a different type of one-on-one conversations. But it's not easy and it's not for everyone, and I think that's where I always say that the pandemic separated the men from the boys. It separated the leaders from the managers, right? Okay, so um, I think that's all we have for today. Let me see if there are some other comments, questions here. I see a comment from Venkat. Thank you for taking up the question. So Venkat, one thing that one thing that I really enjoy in Clarity Chat conversations is that I since I no longer have any affiliations to any of the corporates, I can speak my mind and I can say how I feel it, and I can support it with like my principles. Like simply, for example, 40 versus 168. So you can ask me all the hard questions and all the questions you don't see anyone answering. I'm like always up for picking up difficult topics, or what I call as taboo topics, right? So we have another one from Sara Hanks saying, I agree with that. It starts with being a position for too long and getting complacent. Absolutely. Uh, they call it comfort zone. Hey, thanks, Venkat, for that comment. And yeah, thank you, Sets, for those words of appreciation. With that, thank you, everyone, for joining me on this. I always think that, like, I'll be able to do this AMA session in 45 minutes. But thanks to your questions, it doesn't happen that way. So thank you all for attending, engaging, and thank you everyone who's watching the recording. For being there with me in this Clarity Chat journey. Um, I'll give the rest of the weekend for you. I need to rush to a function as well. So thank you once again, and everyone have a great weekend. Bye bye. See you next Saturday.